So, in ancient history, on Friday the 7th of May, 2021, we began class by watching another beacon video, this time from Minecraft, where they actually had their beacons in a big circle. So the beacons were lit and the lights came all through the mountains. Think about that. Wouldn't that be an interesting job? You're stationed on a mountain peak, waiting and waiting and waiting, waiting. It may have never come in your lifetime. Maybe your grandparents were there, and then you're there, and no lights, and then all of a sudden, you're having a cup of tea. You take a 5 minute break. It's burning. I'm late. I failed. What a life! And if you don't laugh at that, it's only because I didn't tell it well. So, we saw the beacons, and this is in reference to King Alfred the Great, who builds the beacons. Now, Anglo-Saxon England is a weak and wealthy land. Even with the Danes, it's still a society that does not tend to be as strong as the barbarians that still exist out there in the world. So England, which basically is everything east of Wales and south of Scotland, is on the weak side and still has to worry about outsiders. That's why a king of Denmark was also king of England. After Canute comes the reign of King Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor is called that because he is a fairly priestly fellow. He's scholarly and not on the warlike side, and he lives to a ripe old age. But Edward the Confessor, during his time as ruler, has a few difficult moments that are going to come back and haunt England. Because, as a younger man, he's captured by the Duke of Normandy, and he's held for ransom. And what the king promises instead of money to William the Bastard, Duke of Normandy, the young duke, and he's called William the Bastard because his legitimacy is questioned by some. William is promised, he claims, that when Edward the Confessor dies, since Edward does not have a son of his own, that he will adopt William so that William will become the new king of England. Promise! So William says.
You have another note sheet?
I might somewhere. Why? What happened?
I'm just missing a page.
Okay.
You know.
I don't have it convenient right now. I'll check, but I'll check while I'm talking. If I can find one, I'll give it to you. If not, I obviously won't. So, I can't. Well, maybe there's one over here. Edward promises Williams, according to William, that Edward will be king, or that William will be king when Edward dies. Yet. Haraald Hardrada, the Viking king of Norway. Yes. Ella, will you go to the high school office, please? Thank you. Thank you. We'll miss you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks. So, Haraald Hardrada, king of the Vikings of Norway, decides, when that old putz dies, I'm going to go to England and I'm going to be king. After all, why not? I am Haraald Hardrada, king of the Vikings. And he was really among the last of the old-style, scary, hairy Vikings. But that's not all. Because in his later years, Edward needs the help of the English nobility. And the leader of the English nobility, their champion, their representative, is an English nobleman named Haraald Godwinson. Haraald Godwinson is also promised and expects to inherit the kingdom of England when Edward the Confessor dies. And the local nobles are on Harold Godwinson's side. So Edward has set up a rather interesting situation. There are not one, not two, but three potential adopted sons, or at least three potential pretenders to the throne. And each of these three is going to probably try to take the throne by reason or force. Edward dies, 1066. When Edward dies, forces in Norway and forces in Normandy mobilize. Haraald Hardrada is going to call the greatest Viking fleet and army since Halfdan to invade England and take the throne by force. He'll land in the east. He will land first. William the Bastard, Duke of Normandy, is going to gather his forces and get ready to cross the Channel. He's going to land at Hastings a little bit later. So here's how things play out. Haraald Hardrada, the Viking, lands first in the north. Harold Godwinson, who's in London, marches north. And these two forces meet at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The Battle of Stamford Bridge is right about up there, north of London. It's called the Battle of Stamford Bridge because there's a bridge at Stamford. History. And the Vikings try to cross it, and the English hold the other side. And hour after hour, the English cut down the Vikings. It is a grueling, exhausting fight. But in the end, the river is choked with Viking blood and a few English blood too. Harold Hardrada's army is broken, and I believe he's killed, and his attempt to become King of England has failed. Now, Harold Godwinson has just won a great victory. His army is confident and proud, but it's exhausted, and it's just fresh from battle. When they get word that William, Duke of Normandy, has landed down here at Hastings. So, without resting, Harold Godwinson is going to march his army straight from the Battle of Stamford Bridge to fight the Normans at Hastings. Now, the Normans don't pick the site of battle. Harold does. And what he picks is a long hill on which to fight. Here's the top of the hill. These are the slopes of the hill. And the hillside is anchored by swampland and forest. So, with the swampland back here, and the forest as well, Harold Godwinson's forces are protected from the rear. It's going to be unlikely that they are going to get flanked. And Godwinson's Anglo-Saxons are located here, up near the top of the ridge. King Harold in the center. Harold Godwinson's forces are Seaxmen, S-E-A-X-M-E-N. They're called Seaxmen because of the great war axe that they use, which is longer than this pole. They've got some shields too, but their preferred mode of fighting is to just swing the axe and kill with it. And they're very, very good at fighting with these seax. So they're called seaxmen. Now, the heart of Harold's armies are his personal bodyguards, and they are called housecarls. What a housecarl is his own private bodyguard. The biggest, burliest, most violent, most well-disciplined, most skilled soldiers in the entire English army. Housecarls. They're called housecarls because they're part of his household guard. And they are at the heart of Harold's forces. They are closest to him. What Harold is doing is challenging the Normans to charge up the hill and beat him if they can. But all of Harold's forces are foot soldiers. They're all designed to fight close in with the heavy axe, or maybe with a sword and shield or spear and shield. But they're foot soldiers. They're wearing medium armor, ringmail usually. Now let's talk about the Normans. The Frenchified Vikings that are the Normans have just the same kind of Viking size and spirit that the Norwegian Viking Haraald Hardrada had. But size and spirit no longer are powerful enough to conquer England. Haraald Godwinson had beaten a bunch of old-style Vikings at Stamford Bridge. The Normans were not old-style Vikings. The Normans wore chainmail armor. Ringmail is made of links about yay big, linked together with padding underneath. You get hit with a weapon and you're wearing ringmail, it's going to be stopped by the rings, maybe, or it'll be stopped by the padding, maybe. What's really dangerous to ringmail are spear tips and bows and arrows, or crossbow bolts, because the rings aren't that small. They can go through the rings, through the padding, and into the body. So can a spear. Point, tip, kill. Chainmail is much smaller. Much, much smaller. Each link is smaller or as small as my fingernail. And they're all linked together in a much finer mesh. And also, the ringmail of the Norman knights is made of a much higher quality steel. So the Normans wear their chainmail over padding in their helmets. The typical Norman helmet looks rather distinctive. What you've got is a helm that's rather tall and peaked, and it has this big nose guard. And the nose guard will protect you from problems. So the Normans wear their chainmail, and they also have what are called kite shields. A kite shield is called a kite shield. Can you guess why? Because it's shaped like a kite. Right. I love history. And they're big shields with little points that you can, sort of drive into the ground and maneuver around. It's like a combination of the best elements of the Roman big shield, great shield, their tower shields, and a medium-sized round shield. It has aspects of both. But the Norman knights, while they have foot soldiers, are not only foot soldiers. The Normans have mounted knights, men who are trained to fight on armored horses. When you are on foot with a spear or a sword or a shield, and a guy on a horse charges up with a lance or a spear, you're facing a much bigger, much more muscular, much faster opponent with much more inertia. The only hope that Harold's forces have against these mounted knights is they're on a hilltop, and the horses are going to get tired and disorganized trying to go up the steep hill. In addition, though, to having armored knights, which are the horse soldiers, they also have bowmen. and crossbowmen from Brittany. The crossbowmen or bowmen shoot a missile weapon. So they don't have to. They're not designed to get close in and fight with hand-to-hand weapons. The bowmen are going to take up position within range, and they're going to pour arrows or quarrels or bolts into the English forces. So the Normans do have foot soldiers, they have knights, and they have bowmen. They also have engineers, but the engineers aren't going to play a distinctive role in this. They'll be used as footmen. What this means is that if it was on level ground, William the Bastard, Duke of Normandy, would have every advantage. Instead of having his entire army come up close to the English and start swinging, his footmen would do that to distract the English. His bowmen would take up position and start firing into the English, and the horsemen would look for an opportunity of weakness in the English and then hit that weakness hard with their lances. Imagine being on foot holding a shield with a charging horse, a man on that horse holding a big heavy spear, set in such a way that if it touches you, you'll be lifted up and thrown as you're killed. It's serious stuff. So Harold's position on that hilltop is very important. If he remains on the hilltop and he holds out, he wins. He expects the Normans to be like the surf. He's going to be like the rock, and the surf will beat against the rock and beat against the rock and beat against the rock, but ultimately the rock will hold. So, morning comes. Everyone prays and has breakfast. Then the Normans are coming up the hill. And there is battle all along the crest of the ridge. The horses are tired and disorganized. The footmen also, exhausted, just climbing the hill in armor. And then the Saxmen are waiting and beating down on them. And because they didn't just have to climb a hill, they're fresh. The crossbowmen shoot, but the angle of the shots makes it harder to hit anyone with force because you're shooting not only at range, but you're shooting uphill. The Normans are driven back after their first attack. The Saxons cheer. William takes stock, reorganizes his forces, gives them a little breather, and then a couple hours later, it's up at them again! Charge! The Norman footmen and horse soldiers and bowmen go up the hill, and there's more fighting along the crest. And this time, the English hold the Normans off and drive them back even quicker. This is not going the way William wants. He has a plan. The English are strong, they're confident, they've just driven us back twice. I know what we're going to do. So, really? Oh, that might work. Yeah. So he tells the plan to his men. And then the third time that morning, up and at them! They charge up the hill. And there's fighting on the crest. However, at this point, the Normans begin to break and run, screaming for Mama. Ma mère! Ma mère! That's Mama in French. And they begin running, not fighting their way back down, not retreating in orderly fashion like they did before, but they basically start, them English! They're just too tough! Especially the horsemen. The horsemen turn and flee down the hill. Now understand, battle is an emotional thing. You are running on adrenaline. We just beat them the first time. And the English are like, we're going to beat them more. And then the second time, we should go down after them. And Harold said, no, no, no. You will not go after them. You will hold your ground. After the second retreat, he actually has to yell at his men to hold their ground because they want to go out. They just beat the Normans back. They want to go down the hill and finish it. They don't want to keep waiting up here passively to be attacked. Well, after the Normans cut and run, seemingly so afraid of the English, Harold can't keep his men under control. They're like, no, go, yeah! And they go down the hill. And Harold's like, no, don't, no! So, here's the scene. The Norman horsemen are running down a hill, riding down a hill, onto the flat, with Anglo-Saxon foot soldiers chasing them. Do you see a problem here? We've seen this before with the Parthians and the Romans at the Battle of Carrhae. At a prearranged signal, once the Anglo-Saxons are spread out all along the hillside going, yeah, we'll get them. The Norman knights that had been appearing to be panicked immediately reform ranks, turn around, and hit the English. And the English are no longer on their defensive position, protected by swamp and forest. The English are spread out, and the Normans cut through them like a hot knife through butter. King Harold himself is killed. Haraald Godwinson is dead. Haraald Hardrada was killed at Stamford Bridge. The only survivor is William the Bastard, Duke of Normandy, who is soon to be crowned King of England. Now, this great event is a turning point in English history. The Normans are an alien people. They're not Viking Danes like the Viking Danes. They're not Viking Norwegians. They're not other just Germanic people. These are Vikings that have been Frenchified. They don't speak Viking Germanic anymore. They speak French. This is 100 years after Rollo. They don't live like Vikings anymore. They live like a people apart. And the Normans are going to treat Englishmen like slaves and second-class citizens in their own country for the next 250, 300 years. It's going to be bad. The Normans commemorate their victory by having a tapestry built that is way long, that like a comic book tells the story of all this. It's called the Bayeux Tapestry because it's kept at the castle of Bayeux for many, many generations. And what I'm about to do is show you some videos dealing with the Bayeux Tapestry. So again, please shut the fan off, close the windows, and you at home look online for the link.